Welcome to the Humans of Grappling podcast. We're here with Jimmy House.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, of course.
You came in on your week here in Vegas, shooting a bunch of cool shit with a lot of cool people.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So what? I mean, you'll post all the content with like your respective people or whatever, but. You recently talked about a move to Austin, Texas, right?
Yeah. So April 2nd is our move date. We're based in Phoenix, Arizona, and coming back here a few years ago is where I met you in the morning class at Tin Planet.
Right.
Since then, a lot of different things have happened, but a lot of different things has kind of led to me making the decision to continue everything I'm doing now, be it jiu-jitsu, lifting, pro wrestling, all that stuff in Texas, and Austin seems to be the best landing spot that gives me access to all of that.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. No, I actually went out to Austin for my bachelor party last year. We trained with the B team at
that's awesome.
Austin. Yeah, we got fucked up by Nicky Rod.
Oh, really? Yeah. He's a monster. He's one of the two best people I've ever rolled with in my life, and I've rolled with pretty much all of them except for Gordon.
Yeah.
Would be Nicky Rod and then Big Dan.
Oh, yeah.
Those two, as far as like pure dominance goes, on me specifically, those are two of the top.
That's
easily, for sure.
Yeah. It's crazy how there's monsters out there.
Yeah.
Like you think there's always somebody bigger and stronger.
Yeah. And then I made the decision shortly after that. I'm like, 88 kilograms. We'll do that.
we want to limit to the size of these guys.
Yeah.
Right. It's hilarious. So, since I know you had a knee injury recently, you've been rehabbing with knees over toes kind of training. So I think, how's that been going?
Honestly, phenomenal. And today, shortly before I came here, I hit a bunch of new milestones in regards to the mobility I have in my knee again, the strength, and everything there. So basically, prior to the knee injury, I had been really gung-ho on full range of motion training, knees over toes, ATG type stuff. And I've been doing a lot of that mobility or strengthening and lengthening stuff for probably about a year, consistently. And I got myself up to a pretty good point. I did my first 2 Nordic curls, body weight unassisted, right the day before the knee injury happened.
Oh, wow.
I was doing almost 200-pound weighted split squats and all those different movements that were progressing drastically.
Right.
Now, the day that it happened, and this is the thing I say when it comes to that stuff, is that they talk about bulletproofing your body. Yeah. And a lot of people will take it as BS because that doesn't mean you can't get injured, and it doesn't. But what it does mean is that you can mitigate the potential of injury or the potential outcome.
Sure.
So for me, basically what happened was I was training with my good friend Austin, and he was getting ready for Nogi Worlds. He's the owner of Soul BJJ in Phoenix.
Oh, okay.
And so we're literally, it always happens on the last round.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, it's and they have to announce it too. They have to literally say last round, and I go, and then it happens.
Oh,
the last times, 3 times my knee has popped. It's been because of that.
No.
But anyway, so he pulled me in, made me step. Good setup.
Yeah.
Went for an outside trip. He came in a little high. Obviously you want to be down more towards the ankle. He came in to my knee, and so that his body weight came in to the outside of my knee, and I believe that's when I fully tore my PCL. I felt a couple things go there. Damn. And then I kind of went with the pressure. Then both of us came down at the same time on my knee falling, basically. Yeah, and so that's when my MCL went, and then somewhere in there, a partial tear in my ACL, and then fractured my femur. Jesus so a lot of different things, that was 10 weeks ago from today.
Oh, wow.
So now today, coming out of that, doing super heavy backward sleds, forward sleds. Actually, I am better at ATG split squat now than I was prior to the injury, just as far as mobility and range of motion, so that's good. The only thing I really have left to unlock is being able to take a full shot, penetration step.
Sure.
So I put myself at 85% healed right now, and without surgery. Yeah. Obviously with those diagnosis, any doctor probably would have recommended surgery.
Yeah.
I kind of just put my trust in the training that I did prior, and then just the concept of being able to rehab your body through most injuries as long as you have the blueprint to do so. Sure. And I believe I did. So I just kind of put confidence and trust in what I knew.
Yeah.
Had a bunch of various mentors that helped me through that process, and then now 10 weeks removed, I think I'm probably about 6 weeks from getting back on the mat seriously.
Wow, that's amazing.
Thank you.
That is a crazy I know people who have had terrible knee injuries, and they had to get surgery. I've had to get surgery. I've had to get meniscus surgery. but that was like more like wear and tear. Where
Right,
I was like,
okay.
I probably can't like make the meniscus heal all that much.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that makes sense. Like you're with the backward sleds, like I have like a sled in the garage to drag, and like that promotes blood flow
That's
and all
good.
that kind of stuff. So I'm a believer in
That's
it,
awesome.
So
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of different forms that are great for grappling. I think that's a great one to have as a foundation. For example, if that's like the only type of training you ever did, you would benefit in a lot of different ways. I think a step past that, if you add certain powerlifting concepts, bodybuilding concepts, just strength and conditioning concepts, say from more of a sports performance standpoint, you can like advance your training even more. But jiu-jitsu wise, it is very beneficial to be strong in very compromised ranges of motion.
for sure.
You know, a lot of people that are in like basketball or football, they work with specific joint angles and they do the majority of their volume through, say, like 90 degrees and stuff like that. And conceptually it makes sense, but also at the same time too, I believe this type of training prepares you if you were ever taken to a point where, you know, your shoulder is like not where it should be. Like, are you strong enough to deal with the potential tension and pressure on like a super fast arm bar or not? And it could be the difference between, again, maybe 10 weeks sitting out versus like an entire year.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. And it's like it's an aspect that like I think grapplers don't really, or maybe the majority of grapplers don't really understand of like, they think the best training for grappling is just grappling. They don't think about preparing their body outside of that. And I mean, especially some particular knees over toes things like the tib bar raises.
Yeah.
That's very like applicable to like butterflies.
Yeah,
Right?
right.
Like I feel like my hooks are so much stickier
That's good.
because of that. Like, what other things have you like seen in like I guess the combination of things, like you've done a lot of different training modalities like leading up to this too, right? You've been in trainings ever since you were 5 or so.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So I guess what are all the things that you like regularly do or that you cycle through, or like do you do your own programming? Do you have somebody else do your programming? What makes it into a Jimmy House workout?
Yeah, so basically I do a bit of a collaboration between my coach that's more on the powerlifting side of things. He is the one that introduced me to the ATG style of training, and since then I've just kind of taken it and ran with it for a bit of my own, in a sense that he does it for his powerlifting and his durability there. But now getting really deep into it, I've tried to take certain exercises and put a bit of a jiu-jitsu twist on it or whatever, just to appeal more to my audience, I guess.
Sure.
But with that said, it's interesting because I've lived it for so long. So I've experimented with almost any training modality, maybe outside of like CrossFit and Olympic weightlifting.
Sure.
But with that said, I'm at the point now to where realistically, like if I never got any ounce stronger, or if I never put another pound of muscle on for the rest of my life, jiu-jitsu wise, I'd probably be just fine.
Yeah. For sure.
But now it's kind of a thing where I feel like I'm kind of polishing off or like coloring the lines per se, where if I am able to target like, hey, like my hip flexor is very tight in this given position, like what accessory movements can we put in that will help with that? Hamstrings for me right now is going to be what I'm targeting the most. With the knee injury, the ACL partial tear, the hamstring right behind my right knee is a little bit tighter than normal. But just in general too, that's something that's always been a limiting factor of mine. Like for example, just flexibility wise, I always want to be able to do like the splits down the middle. Hip flexor wise, length, decent, but my hamstrings is what's preventing that. Now, when I started doing the Nordic curls, what I found in translation to grappling is I'm not the tallest guy and my legs are relatively thick. So getting a body lock on somebody my size or bigger is few and far between.
Sure.
But when I started doing the Nordic curl training, what I found is that the strength that adds in the joint angle where the tension's the most maximized actually had a huge carryover into my back control, where I used to not have any confidence doing back control on anyone bigger than like 185 pounds.
Sure.
But as soon as I started doing the Nordic curls 3 times a week, I started getting a lot of comments like how strong my hips are and how strong my hamstrings were and stuff like that. I had the conditioning to be able to like basically just mimic a body lock-esque type of control, but purely with the strength and the isometric squeeze of my hamstrings.
Gotcha.
So that was a huge thing. So in regards to like grappling and whatnot, I would always suggest like Nordic curl training would be huge,
Yeah.
hip flexor training, and just like strengthening your hips in any given direction. Most people complain about back issues.
Sure.
And many times it's most likely because of the fact that the lower back is not even weak, it's just taking the brunt of the load in most positions. So hamstrings, glutes, and hips would be the main things that I would really focus on, and that's what's helped me with a lot of my prior back issues or even like SI issues in the past.
Gotcha. Definitely, and I'm a huge believer in Nordic curls too. Like I do it with underneath a dumbbell rack in my garage.
Oh, cool.
So I've been working since the pandemic. Like I bought a bunch of weights for the garage, and I haven't done a full Nordic curl yet or anything like that. But I'm still like working up to it, and I've seen like your progressions and regressions on that. And I need to like start incorporating some of those because you have like different targets that you reach for, right? Like with the different blocks and things like that.
Yeah, so basically I think the best way once you're able to do it is to just take a very heavy band that allows you to get full extension of the leg and then work through that range of motion gradually. There is definitely benefit to say doing your body weight in a partial range of motion. So basically the way I see it is most people aren't strong enough to do a full Nordic curl off the get-go with their entire body weight.
Sure.
So you add something in like a very heavy resistance band that allows you to not necessarily use your hands to assist, but you can just rest your body weight on that, and that'll help kind of carry you through wherever your body can't. You do that. Usually my training program with that be like 3 days a week, 2 sets banded, and then 2 sets with the box with my body weight. So as I'm doing my entire body weight through range of motion with the band, going all the way down, all the way up, I'm also tandeming that with the box. So like as my true body weight strength increases with the box getting lower, the band tension should be getting lighter to where like the two kind of meet in the middle. That's what I found worked really well for me. The last aspect of that is to be very mindful of your overall volume. So generally I keep my volume very low, especially if I'm doing it multiple times a week. So no more than like 4 working sets. Each one might have anywhere from 3 to 5 reps. So I just keep it at that. And whether or not I can do more, it doesn't necessarily matter as long as I'm like still striving for that full rep. So that's what's worked really well for me. And now coming out of the injury, I'm at the point now to where with the band and a box, I'm almost all the way down. And so once I can get down to that point, then I'll basically progress it again in the same fashion. And the good part is that since I built the strength up prior to the injury, that reference point is still there, like muscle memory is still there.
Sure.
So I doubt that it would take me 2 months to get to my body weight again. It'll probably be at least like half that time, knowing my body, how it responds at least.
That's cool. Yeah, no, that's like strength is a skill that like it takes time to work. Like I'm sure Mark Bell said that or whatever.
Yeah.
But like it's something that grapplers like neglect a lot of the times, right? Like we just think, oh, just gotta roll more, roll, but like we end up like overcompensating or making up compensations. We're all like fucking roly polies. Like, we're not like opening up, and we're not testing ourselves at the different ranges of motion, like where we need to be strong in like weird angles and shit like that. Right? So one thing that I've noticed with the Nordic hamstring curl is that it's now I know how to flex my hamstrings, and like cool. That helps me like finish some triangles.
That's awesome.
Easier. So it's like it just kind of blows up like an airbag and just cuts off the side of their carotids.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's pretty dope. So definitely recommend knees over toes for grapplers. So did you so you had like some pretty intense workouts with the RP Strength guys. So is is their brand like Team Full ROM or what? So is that seems to carry over with knees over toes?
It does, pretty much. Yeah, it's basically the same thing. I guess the only takeaway between the two is that they're more geared towards bodybuilding and mostly hypertrophy, and then the knees over toes is going to be geared towards like mobilization and durability and stuff like that. But with the concept being the same, you can kind of get a little bit of both.
Yeah.
For example, with all the knees over toes training that I've done, I definitely have not lost any muscle. In fact, I feel like I've added muscle in some lagging areas. With the stuff that I did with them over the week, you basically take the ATG concept or full ROM concept, and you apply it to various bodybuilding movements, a barbell row, a lat pull down, a pull up, a dumbbell press. And so the good thing was, where I feel like a lot of times when they bring people on their channel, those people probably have a bigger transition than what I did, thankfully, just because in my own way I was already training very similar to how they do. They have their critiques and stuff, and I took away a lot. Like, I'm actually really excited to go back home and apply what they taught me. But for the most part, it wasn't a huge transition, just because in my training for the last year and a half, I've been like super adamant on full range of motion, everything. And then you get into the debate between full range of motion and then like 90-degree training and stuff like that. And for the most part, I'm gonna be more so on the side of like full range of motion for nearly everything. There's some things, say for example, like a deadlift, where you can't not have a joint angle that's less than 90 or more than 90 degrees or just about. And so I feel like lifts like that are important for power and athleticism and such, but mostly the majority of my training is geared towards that, because just performance, grappling, durability, but then also like acknowledging the fact that I do have, I guess, a little bit of a toe or so in the bodybuilding pool. I do want to continue building a physique and whatnot, and if we're talking about like building muscle, especially like as a natural athlete, I believe doing full range of motion for the majority of your movements is going to be one of the best things that you can do. So then that way, I can go down a deep tangent with this, but let's say
we're on a podcast.
I know.
Let's go.
Let's say, like, what I've seen is that there's a bunch of different ways to add muscle, right? And you go to any like commercial gym and you'll see guys that are relatively muscular lifting with partial range of motion or bouncing a barbell off their chest, and clearly you can add muscle in a bunch of different ways. But with that said, it doesn't necessarily mean that the way X person is doing it is super efficient. So now, with that said, what I've seen is where you take maybe like your traditional bodybuilder, more so like partial range of motion, time under tension type stuff, which has its merit. But what I come to find is that when you do that style of training for the majority of your training, then you start to run into these essentially muscle imbalances between your short and long range strength. And even though the bodybuilder is not maybe concerned, say like a jiu-jitsu person is, with being strong in a weird position, the reason why that has diminishing returns is simply because you see videos all the time between bicep tears and pec tears and everything else. Like when you see like a bodybuilder doing a heavy incline press and them tearing their pec, there's a few things going on there. Biggest thing is that at a certain point, once they have that specific load on them, there's short range strength, which they're probably used to doing, maybe dumbbells like here to here. At a certain point, they selected a weight that was too much for their given musculature and joints and ligaments, and they went maybe just a little bit too far, and then that's when like something tends to go.
I see.
And so that's why like you kind of, in my opinion, set yourself up to have a shorter ceiling of potential, just because as you get stronger through that range of motion, the weight has to get heavier for the most part as you continue to increase. But then as the weight gets heavier, you also deal with the possibility of fatigue, poor form, or whatever else, causing your general range of motion to go like an inch or so outside of that, and then like something tears or pops or whatnot, whether it's a pec, a bicep, a quad. And that's why like I get tons of comments on my bicep curls like, you're gonna fucking tear your bicep and blah, 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 blah. And it's not that it's impossible. I'm not ignorant to the fact that injury is possible, but I also train full range of motion of my bicep like all the time. So if we were talking percentages, I would be less likely to tear my bicep doing a full range of motion curl than the guy that does like half curls and then like goes a little bit too far down and then it goes. And I see that all the time too, like preacher curls and stuff. Most people train preacher curls here to here, and then fatigue or the weight's a little bit too heavy and they go a little bit too far, and then that's when something pops. And so that those are like the common themes. And what most people don't understand is like, you see the video and you see somebody going heavy on incline or a curl or whatever, and it's just like more so a blanketed statement like, oh, you're gonna tear your bicep doing that. And what you don't see is, you see the person, but you don't see like their training that led up to that point, you know. And there's two types of people for the most part. Even when I get to my heaviest curl, I'm like staying there for like no more than 2 weeks, then I very quickly back down. You know, let's say my max is like 80s with one arm on a preacher curl. I'm starting that program generally probably with like the 20s, like super, super high rep, condition the muscle, condition the tendons, and building that through like anywhere from 12 to sometimes 16 weeks to finally get to the 80s and finally show like, hey, this has merit to it. But I don't stay there, nor do I think anybody needs to be doing a 1 rep max on the curl. But there's a lot of reasons why I do it. One, like Instagram. 2, business.
Right.
Yeah, business wise, and just to prove like, hey, like not everything is like verbatim like, oh, heavy weight equals tear. Like you can train your body to be prepared for stuff like that.
Right, definitely. And well, you compete in curling too, right? Like the strict curl,
right,
with the CT Fletcher and all that.
Yeah, and so that's a good point too, because I hadn't strict curled like on a wall since my last competition back in May. I'd just been doing my preacher curl, single arm, full range of motion, just doing that. And a couple of my friends started doing strict curl, and then I was like, wonder what I can get. So then I did strict curl for the first time in like half a year, and actually hit like a PR after just doing the preacher curls and stuff like that. So I think there is a lot of just backing behind that when it comes to the strength of the bicep. And it's like kind of a joke, but it's also kind of not. I call it my armbar defense PRs,
Yeah, definitely.
And I can't tell you, actually, my role with Nicky Rod, outside of getting my ass kicked, the 2 like glimmers of success I had, actually, he threw 2 really hard arm bars, and I promise you, he was putting every bit of horsepower he had into my arm and my face and everything else. But like the strength of my bicep, I think, was something that he was not expecting. I was able to actually buy myself enough time to escape both of his attempts.
That's awesome.
He later choked me out with like arm triangle and a couple mounted triangles. But in those given armbar attempts, like I was actually able to hold this guy off. And my girlfriend was my witness. But like, and I remember coming out of that roll, I went to him like, oh my God, like he wanted that armbar bad, and I was just flexing as hard as I could. So you don't need to be as strong as I am in the curl, but doing curls with such effect does help, in my opinion, defend arm bars, buy yourself a little bit extra time, and even prevent like potential injury from happening. Like I saw a video the other day of somebody hitting a flying arm bar, just like jumping into it, and then they just took the arm out there. If you're the wrong person or untrained person, this movement with all somebody's body weight taking you that way could very easily hurt or tear a bicep off the bone. It's one of those things where you won't realize you needed it until after the fact, but like if you take somebody like myself as proof, it's worth like adding into your program to some degree.
Yeah, definitely. And having a better squeeze isn't too bad either.
Yeah,
right? Like, how have you noticed, like, well, I guess you haven't been trained jiu-jitsu recently, but like since you've been doing more full range bicep curls, like how's your rear naked choke squeeze versus previously, I guess? Yeah,
so that's a good question. This is where I combine a full range of motion with something to the effect of overcoming isometrics. Meaning, generally, if I'm going to describe like a curl to do to strengthen your rear naked choke, is gonna be like some form of hammer curl.
Sure.
For the most part, with the hand going here like this, you're either doing like a cross body hammer curl, just like anything like this, just strengthening the bicep with the brachial radialis and all that good stuff, the forearm and whatnot. The other thing to complement with that, and this is something that I picked up from my friend Josh Setlich, who's like kind of known as like a jiu-jitsu strength coach.
Oh yeah.
He does a lot of overcoming and yielding isometrics. So he takes the medicine ball per arm, like one of the smaller, softer ones, but basically he'll just do time holds in the rear naked choke position, more so like a short choke position, but just focusing on the amount of power that he can force or produce into the ball. That way, like full range of motion here, you're developing strength through the full extension and flexion of the joint, but then also you're like increasing your given strength at this specific angle, and then on top of that, building the conditioning to say, hold that squeeze for a little bit longer than you could had you not.
Sure.
So, and with like rear naked chokes, especially in high level competition, it's like that's the one where the person's ego can have a little bit more pull than maybe like a heel hook or anything else, where it's like, oh, I can last this, I can last. So you'll have to like really like not only choke them, but like hold it for a substantial amount of time. Most people at a high level will probably go out, get close to going out before they actually tap, versus like a heel hook. If you're smart, you should probably tap. So you'll have to have the strength and muscular conditioning to be able to like finish most chokes there.
So. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's dope. That's kind of like, why I don't know, why I'm enjoying on this whole thing is like because this has been like two of my like passions for a long time.
That's awesome.
Like like I started lifting because of football in high school, and like in wrestling, like I wrestle in high school too, and but like marrying like, okay, what are like specific things that we can do for jiu-jitsu, and yeah, just all these like very specific like strength exercises. I like, shit, dang it.
This is a reminder.
Alexa, stop. Okay, there you go. Cool. So yeah, that's really dope that you like consider all these different things like when designing your own training, or do you like you do programming for other people too?
Yeah, so I do have my online coaching that I do, and then I'm currently working on releasing our first like template program for anyone to buy. But for the most part, right now, I just have my online clients that I do the customized programming for.
Cool. And are your clients like just general population fitness, or is it like jiu-jitsu guys, grappler? Like who's your typical client, I guess?
I would say that maybe just a little bit more jiu-jitsu strength clients, but it's relatively even from powerlifters or just like general fitness type people. Yeah, the nice way about how I train is that regardless of what your goal is, I probably recommend something close to it anyways.
Sure.
Longevity, strength, building muscle, like a lot of them, if you do it correctly, tie into one another. I think a lot of people are under the impression that, like for example, like people will go to a bodybuilding coach to build muscle and to build a physique and whatnot, because me as a jiu-jitsu, powerlifting, mobility guy wouldn't know how to do so, right? But at the same time, I think more and more is coming out now, not that it's new information, it's just more easily accessible, where doing exercises in the full range of motion or doing mobility work, how that all plays a huge role in building a good physique, building strength in given lifts, and just building performance in a given sport. So I think the biggest thing there is like, I probably wouldn't do clients in bodybuilding that are like on the other side of the spectrum, like untested, just because that's a whole side of the world that I have no knowledge in. I purposely choose to not be knowledgeable.
Sure.
But for like somebody like myself that competes in natural bodybuilding, that's something I 100% would take on for sure. And it's really the same thing. I wouldn't have them do much else, maybe a little bit more volume, a little bit more isolation work, maybe a little bit less specific work. Like I wouldn't have them do all the exercises that I would for a jiu-jitsu guy, but conceptually it's very similar.
Makes sense. Yeah, I mean that's your perspective on the world. Like you're informed of, okay, this is how we train, and here's like the framework that you developed for yourself and developed for training other people. It has, I don't know, probably a handful of like key exercises that you kind of prescribe most people, and like, cause everyone needs to squat, everybody needs to like lunge or whatever, like these general kind of things that make up a healthy person, right?
Right. Yeah, I talked about this on the Phil DeRue's podcast, where the reason why I feel comfortable in dabbling in 3 or 4 different sports is, sometimes people think it's impressive, and I appreciate it, but I've been doing this for so long to where doing jiu-jitsu, doing powerlifting, and doing bodybuilding are not too far away from each other, because like they all kind of benefit. Like the muscle that you're working to add on in bodybuilding has benefits in both powerlifting and jiu-jitsu in regards to physique, but also like strength application. Obviously the powerlifting being the main strength sport has definitely applications in jiu-jitsu, but also applications in bodybuilding, being able to build muscle in a different way. And then jiu-jitsu wise, as far as cardio, mobility, being in good shape in general, that also bleeds into both. And I also find that mentally it's a good break from both. So when it comes to myself and the clients, that's why I train most people somewhat similar with a little bit of deviation, just because I don't see a huge cutoff between the 3 things as if they're like completely different.
Right. Yeah. It's all trying to optimize somebody like moving through space and making them more durable, making them healthier. Like everybody, all those 3 sports need like the same kind of basics.
Right. I also, even from a business perspective, if I'm coaching a powerlifter or bodybuilder, it's like you could go to anybody and they can have you like do time under tension or partial range type reps, or you could go to any powerlifting coach and they can tell you to like do a box squat or anything like that. I'd rather continue to separate myself from being successful in both sports, but also having modalities in there that you normally wouldn't see from a traditional coach in the field.
Sure.
To prove that, one, it can be done, and two, like to continue to prove my point and why I train the way I do. So yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, and you train well. I mean, for you specifically, like you're very explosive. Like you just fucking get it there, attack the weight. Like you're all your reps go like super fast.
Thank
so
you.
that's like that. I mean, obviously that's something you've like. Where does that come from?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. So I would say definitely like some natural ability there, like being in sports my whole life and just lifting for a long time. Naturally, you're going to add some explosion and athleticism, you know, especially with a specific stimulus like a deadlift or a squat.
Yeah.
But when I first started powerlifting after high school, there was two specific people, one guy for conventional, one guy for sumo. The guy for conventional, his name is Brett Crispin, and then the guy for sumo, his name is Ben O'Brien. And I would basically, and they're both like mid 700 pullers at 198 or 220. And at the time, this was like almost unheard of, like 6 years ago. Now it's like high schoolers are doing this, but at the time, basically they'd approach 405 or 495 and just explode through the floor and just rip that shit up like it was 135 pounds. And I was like 18 at the time. So that was like mind-blowing to me. And then so with all my warm-ups for deadlift or squat thereafter, I figured, okay, like I'm just gonna lift this as fast as I possibly can. The diminishing returns initially was like I would sacrifice form to make the bar move faster, and then I would have less carryover to like weights that are closer to my 1 rep max. Since then, I found a better combination between lifting weights explosively, but not letting it sacrifice my form so much that it throws me off when I am actually going heavier. Because like I would be able to move 405 really fast, but then if I got closer to my 1 rep max, be it like 700 or something like that, there'd be some type of form breakdown that would inevitably make me fail at the weight. So that's where that started, and now 6-7 years removed from seeing those guys and practicing like that style of lifting, it's just kind of, I think, something where over time, I just build explosion through those specific movements, which I talked about it again when I did the Phil Daru thing, like with a deadlift. If you took the joint angles of your hips and your shins and everything else there, and you kind of like staggered your stance a little bit and face somebody, you're kind of in a wrestling stance for the most part. And so like there's some similar power and force production going on in a deadlift than there is in like a wrestling stance if you're shooting. I always describe deadlift as like a weighted jump effectively. So I get in a stance that's very similar to a stance that I would if I'm trying to jump super high. And then the only thing I have to do from there is connect my hands and drive my feet through the floor. So yeah, I would probably say that's a very long-winded answer to your question, but I just saw these two guys that I was around lifting weights super fast, and it blew my mind, and I just wanted to basically do the same. Because they were the best guys in Arizona at the time, so I figured if they're doing it, I might as well do it too.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that's carried over tremendously for your athletic career. I guess even with your pro wrestling career, like since you've been adding like these mobility dimensions for like you probably have to do like jump off ropes and flips and whatever, add some like new skills in terms of that. Like I'm sure that's being explosive helps there too.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's when I started to really notice the knees over toes training kick in, because in jiu-jitsu you don't necessarily need to be doing a whole lot of high jumping unless you're like Andy Varela or something like that. Exactly. But when I started doing the pro wrestling, and then I was doing like leapfrogs and other moves, well, actually a lot of the bumps you take, you do have to actually fling yourself pretty high in the air. So then I was like, oh wow, like, cause I never do any really jump training, like any vertical or broad jump type stuff. So any inches that I've added to my jumping height has been solely from obviously the powerlifting, but also now getting into the knees over toes stuff, the split squats, the reverse squats for the hip flexors, the Nordic curls and all that. I was like, oh wow, I can get some decent height on that. That's one of the things my wrestling coach Don Vitale pointed out when I first started with him, was like, I can jump higher than most people. And with like a leapfrog, you're jumping over somebody as they run underneath you, and like one of the ways to kind of wow the audience is to do kind of like a cheerleader-esque type thing where your toes touch your hands. So the added like adductor mobility that I had also played a role in that too. So I'm still very new to pro wrestling, so I'm sure there's other positions that I'll find. I know one of my client actually online is one of AEW's like top tag team guys,
nice.
Dante Martin, and he's super athletic. But he and I both kind of agreed, like, if somebody's coming to clothesline you and you're able to basically slide into a reverse Nordic, which is like you going backwards, and bring yourself out of that, like that would look really cool.
Yeah.
Or like dodging some type of maneuver with like a split or something like that would look really cool. I think, you know, for myself going into the pro wrestling world, I'm, you know, 5'9", 6 foot tall on a WWE roster, right? And I gotta find things to find things to kind of make up for that lack of hype per se, whether it's my physique, my charisma, mobility that just kind of makes me stick out. You know, most people expect that from like the really tall, lightweight guys, but if somebody that has some muscle on them can also do it, that's obviously something that helps too. So when I was training for the pro wrestling prior to the injury, that was like my main thing. I gotta work really, really hard to make up for my lack of height, and hopefully with the attributes that I've accumulated, it does impress somebody of importance.
Makes sense. Yeah, that's definitely I mean, you're approaching it, pro wrestling, just like you approach jiu-jitsu, just like you approach bodybuilding, powerlifting, whatever. Like you see what you need to add. Like you see, like, okay, well, like your athleticism is great where it's at, but you want to add more to be one of the best, right? So that's pretty dope to like have add an entire like training modality with the knees over toes to like make you more add the wow factor, add the height factor. And I mean, especially with jiu-jitsu becoming more like wrestle-jitsu, like the explosiveness, the power from standing, like that's even more important nowadays anyway too, right?
And it's funny how it's been literally maybe like a 2-year transformation in the jiu-jitsu world as far as like how predominant it is now. It's almost like when you think about jiu-jitsu, your thoughts kind of change. Like for example, jiu-jitsu, when I first started, you think about like guard and stuff like that. But now it's kind of like transition, and you think about like your wrestling and like high level hand fighting and stuff like that.
Right.
People like Nicky Rod obviously are a huge reason for that as far as the transition there, because he showed, for one, it's possible, and then for two, how successful that you can be with that given skill set. I remember actually my first ADCC trials, 2018, 19, one of the two. It was the one that he won that kind of set him off.
Gotcha.
I was one match away from going against him actually, and I wish I lost against Casey Hellenberg, which was like the returning trials champ from the time prior. And I lost by 5 or 7 points, one of the two. And then he went on to go against Nicky Rod. Nicky Rod beat him. I would have inevitably lost against Nicky Rod too, but I would have loved the opportunity to be like a part of his like story to the top, essentially. I do think though that my match with him at the time would have been a little bit more interesting, simply because I would have elected to wrestle with him versus everyone else pulled right away. But I was like one match away from going against him, and I remember like hearing about him a little bit for a while. Like I was studying the East Coast trials footage, and I saw like this Nicky Rod guy. I'm like, that guy looks pretty good, and he's only a blue belt, like all this stuff. And then I was like, oh damn, I get a chance to go against him. And then in my head, I'm like, okay, we can do this. Like, it's gonna be a good match. Let's go. And then after that, just explodes. And I'm like, okay, he's better than I thought. But what I did notice too from his East Coast trials the first time to his West Coast trials, where he was like really dedicated with the Danaher Death Squad, like something happened in that 5-month time frame where his skill just exploded through the roof. Like to be able to get to John Hansen's back and like finish in a rear naked choke within a matter of like a minute or two, like that's mind blowing me, because John Hansen obviously is like one of the best heavyweights in the world. He's beaten my good friend Austin Baker plenty of times, and I consider Austin Baker to be one of the best in the world. And the fact that Nicky Rod just cartwheels over the top and puts him in a rear naked choke, like as a blue belt of 8 months, that's still mind blowing to me. But and so I rolled with Nicky about 2 or 3 weeks out from ADCC. I also went to B Team. I went to Austin, trained with B Team. I trained with New Wave for a little bit, and I got to roll with a lot of those guys like during the midst of the ADCC camp. And I remember Nicky losing to a couple guys on WNO, and I'm like. I feel like he's like better than this. And then I went to train with him at B Team, and I was like, he's definitely better than what and maybe it was just like the stipulation of the match or something, he didn't perform well that night. But then I saw him at ADCC, And I saw him beat like Pena and stuff like that, and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's about as good as I thought he felt too. So I'm like, I felt pretty good watching ADCC because after going against Nicky Rod, I was like, dude, do I suck? Like I thought I was like better than this, but no, I'm like, yeah, no, he's like legitimately the second best guy in the world. And obviously after Matt and I actually went to the UFC Fight Pass event and the first row, so we saw the whole Nicky Rod Gordon Ryan thing, and obviously he made a bunch of corrections from his first match with him.
Sure.
So he's closing the gap, and it's been cool to just kind of witness his come up. I didn't anticipate a whole Nicky Rod ramble there, but yeah.
No, I'm down with like Nicky Rod. Like he claims natty, so it's like I'm down with.
And
like,
so I'd like to touch on that because clearly, like I'm a liar too on my natty status.
Yeah.
Looking at Nicky Rod, I can't speak because I haven't done my research prior to him breaking through jiu-jitsu. But what I can say from when I first saw him four years ago now to where he is now, like if he was running as much copious amounts of gear as everyone says, like you would see like a drastic change in his physique or anything else. Like for the most part, like his body composition is the same. You don't see any drastic changes, be it in his skin or his water retention or anything like that. Like I don't know a whole lot about gear, and I choose not to, but I've been around the community enough to be able to spot on most people.
Sure.
So that's why for me, I actually do believe that he is natural, simply because like if you study his progress for the last few years, there's no drastic change there. It doesn't necessarily completely nullify it for anybody, but for him specifically, I'm gonna go with the side of like, yes. There's like a specific look to it that like I'm not even gonna dive into because it's just gonna backfire on me. But like I don't think he feels it. I just think he's a freak athlete, to be honest with you.
Definitely.
Like
I when I trained with him, he was like, okay, he's like, I don't know, maybe 10% stronger than me, or 20, like a little bit more explosive, a little bit more like just panther like. I'm like, this isn't like otherworldly. This isn't like, I don't know, just it wasn't. It wasn't. I guess like, I mean, 10% more. That's whatever. He's second best in the world. Like that's a lot, but it wasn't like. It wasn't like I was being dominated by an alien or a robot or like just a fucking machine with whatever crazy strength and muscle. So yeah, no, I believe him in the natty story too.
Yeah,
like his look is very achievable with somebody with incredible genetics, right?
Yes, so. And what my closing thoughts on that is that the way the fitness industry now kind of bleeds into the jiu-jitsu community is now, it's like so many people are open about it, which is great because you also don't want to give people the false idea of what they can achieve, or like you don't want to like put people under the impression that you can do what they're doing without it, right?
Yeah.
But then it backfires on somebody like myself that genuinely is drug-free, where I'm sitting here, I'm like, yes, I'm drug-free, and if I wasn't, I would tell everybody, but I actually am, and people are like, why don't you just admit it, bro? People talk about it all the time. It's like, I would love to if I actually did it, but like I don't. So like, I don't know what you want me to do. It's like, I guess if I lie about it just to please people, then maybe I'll start. But that's kind of like the thing, to where like for him, and obviously he's on a much bigger scale than I am, so he probably gets it much more.
Sure.
But I like to use the platform to speak my mind on the subject because I personally believe he is, and that kind of goes on to myself. Like you don't see a drastic change in my physique unless I go on a mega bulk where I just get fat. That's a different thing. But as far as like lean muscle mass goes, my journey from like when I was 16, stepping on stage at like 185 pounds to now being 10 years removed from that, floating around 200 at about 10%, like maybe like 10 to 15 pounds of lean mass over the last 10 years, which is good as a natural, but it's also nothing like out of this world either. So my main argument when people accuse me, it's like, okay, so I was this big when I was 16, so like unless I've been like running gear since I was 9, I think like there's some legitimate gradual progression there, but people are much quicker to accuse than they are to spend the time to actually like get their facts straight. So that's my talk to the world.
No worries. And did you come in as a lightweight or a heavyweight today? I know you just went.
Oh, I know. That was funny.
You just ate some sushi. So
I'm definitely over 200 pounds for sure. Usually, so like with trips like this where I'm recording with somebody, I try to be very strict the first few days. And then traveling kicks in, and granted, it's better than like say eating 3 burgers, but just like stuff like 100 pieces of sushi down the hatch. And
sometimes you got to do it.
I know, like I get back to Arizona, I'll get it off. But I'm probably like 205, 206 right now.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
What he's referencing is a TikTok video that somebody tagged me in, where some guy was like, it's like all these people giving advice and they weigh under 200 pounds. It's like, don't listen to them. And I was like, so I wake up in the morning over 200, so apparently I'm like worth listening to, and then I take a shit, and then all of a sudden everything goes out the window.
You know nothing.
Yeah, I know, it's like, damn it.
It's hilarious. Let's see. So we talked a lot about wrestling, Nicky Rod, and things like that. So you developed your jiu-jitsu style, like, did you wrestle in high school?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I wrestled all 4 years of high school varsity. I came into my senior year #1 in the state of Arizona, and for the most part throughout my senior year, I was bouncing back between like 1 and 2, between myself and the returning state champ from Sunnyside, the same school that Roman Bravo Young went to. And then my senior year, right before state, I got a back concussion. I couldn't wrestle in state. Yeah, so that was like my main passion through high school, and then went straight into powerlifting, just kind of like wanting to do something else. After getting injured, I just had a little bit of I wasn't very motivated to do wrestling again, but took it into powerlifting, and powerlifting was fun until I gained 70 pounds and got to 270, and like, oh, I'm kind of fat and unathletic and unappealing to the opposite sex. So then I decided to lose the weight by starting jiu-jitsu. And that's been my thing since. And I've always looked at jiu-jitsu as like my second chance. When I couldn't wrestle in state my senior year, having high goals, that definitely was a huge hit. It was hard to handle at the time.
Yeah.
But I stepped back in the jiu-jitsu mat, and I was like, oh, I think this is like my second chance. And I think in a lot of ways I've taken full advantage of that. And now going to Austin, having the chance to train with some of the best people in the world, it's like, would you rather be the state champion in high school that everyone forgets about, or you want to like continue to advance your grappling and do something special? So I like the place that I'm in right now.
Definitely. For sure. Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm right there with you, because I broke my hand senior year, second batch of senior year wrestling. Like I posted on the mat, and like I don't know, for whatever reason I put my fists on the mat instead of palm, and yeah, I had similar, like I wanted to get to state. I wanted to like I wrestled in California, so it was it was. It was just my dream to like even like get to the state championship,
no
like
joke,
the state tournament, and but yeah, I couldn't. And so I was like, when I found jiu-jitsu, I was like, oh, this is a second chance. This is a way to like continue to compete and progress, and it's not like wrestling doesn't just end in high school. Like wrestling. I mean, wrestling, if you're not like on a college team or whatever, it basically ends when you're in high school. Yeah. But jiu-jitsu it's this weird thing that adults like get up and whatever, like they all agree to like meet at this one place and kill each other like after work.
I know, right? Yeah.
So I'm super glad that I heard about it in high school, but I thought it was like super barbaric. Like dudes put me in a straight ankle lock and like a guillotine and a rear naked choke, and I just was like, oh, this is so like, I don't know, like so rough or whatever. But I was wrestling too, so like that's not easy. But putting in submissions, like that was foreign to me at first. But like now it's like I get up and do it every day at 6 a.m. So it's a deeply meaningful part of my life, and I'm sure it is to you too. Like
absolutely.
Since you've been training, you've competed at a high level as well. So that's awesome that you're future direction in jiu-jitsu, like your future move, your planned move is influenced by jiu-jitsu.
It really is. So I've been a homebody in Arizona pretty much my whole life. I'm born and raised there. So when we made the decision to move there, there had to be a lot of pieces in place. Like I wouldn't move there, to be honest, just for jiu-jitsu, and I wouldn't move there just because Goldberg lives there, and I wouldn't. It had to be like a bunch of different things. And when I took the trip over there a few months ago, there's just kind of something about after experiencing it and seeing all the things that I could do, where I was like, because when I got my black belt about a year ago now, I knew that I was going to relocate within the year. I just didn't know when or where. And I've been traveling all year round, so I've seen a lot of different parts of the country, and that was like the place for me specifically, where my room for growth and the room for connections and through my passions, the ability to get better and train with the best, that was all accumulated into the decision, like, okay, yeah, Austin, Texas seems to be the most sensible place to actually relocate and continue to advance, essentially.
Definitely. And as someone who relocated I lived in the Bay Area for my whole, basically my whole adult life or whatever. I grew up there and then worked there and relocated out here to Las Vegas. So about 5 years ago now. So
that's cool.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's good to get out of the place that you grew up in, because it's just a different scenery.
I was talking to Tim earlier. If it wasn't for Texas, I'd probably consider, honestly, Vegas to be up there. I wouldn't be much for the strip and the party life at all.
Yeah.
If every time we stay out there, we stay at a Best Western, much outside of that. But as far as lifting and jiu-jitsu, there's a lot of stuff out here that, I think Arizona in some ways is a step or two behind, unfortunately, and not in a bad way, just it's a very spread out community.
Sure.
And I think where other states were very honed in on certain things a little bit sooner than Arizona was. I think Arizona's on the come up.
Sure.
But I think there's places like Vegas and Austin and California, obviously Florida, that has a lot of growth, essentially. And that's the biggest thing for me, is that I'm kind of entering what I would consider a peak that hopefully lasts for the next 6 or 7 years. But with that said, I do want to put myself in a position to where I'm around people that can help me maximize my investment into myself in that way.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, that's great. And having that purpose behind the move of you are leaving your family, your friends, you're leaving your hometown and you're going on a new adventure somewhere else. And I think there's something very symbolic about that too. That's how I felt coming out here. It's I came out here with my now wife, at the time my girlfriend, and it was just we didn't know anybody out here. We didn't really know, or I knew that there was a lot of jiu-jitsu here, that helped influence the move, but I didn't know where I was going to train. I didn't have any connections here or whatever. So it's a good challenge, just as a person, personal development wise. You figure out more about who you are, being away from people who have influenced you your whole life.
Right.
So
yeah, that's awesome, man. Thank you.
Yeah. So no, I'm excited to see what you do out there in Austin.
I appreciate
it. So if people wanted to get in contact with you for online coaching or coaching programs and things like that, where can they find you?
Yeah. So the two best places would be on my Instagram. I have a link tree. You can go to the specific link that'll take you to a online question and answer form. Basically, you can fill out your stuff. That's an application. Or you can go straight to my website at www.jimmyhouse.com and you'll also see the link to apply on there as well.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you, man.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. It was an honor. Yeah. Sweet. Likewise, bro. Thank you.
Thank you.